Episode 10, The Bell Witch. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poisoned Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. As always, thank you for listening. It's October, the spookiest month of the year, and some say the most wonderful time of the year, too. Oh, well, that would be me. Fall and Christmas are my favorite times of the year. The Burr months, as they say, September, October, November, and December. But I've always loved Halloween, so for the month of October, I'm going to do spooky episodes. Ghosts, haunted places, all things scary. This is going to be a fun month, I think. So let's start out with a bang, the Bell Witch. This is a crazy haunting story and one of the few unexplainable-ish ones. Skeptics can always find reasons to dismiss, so I'll try to cover both sides. And there is even a connection to a former president. Well, before he was president. Is this a witch, a spirit, a demon? The Bells never saw a witch, they called it a spirit. This all occurred in Robertson County, Tennessee. Robertson County is located in the central northern border of Tennessee. As of the 2020 United States Census, the population was 72,803 people. The county was named for James Robertson, an explorer, founder of Nashville, and a state senator who was often called the father of Middle Tennessee. Robertson County is not too far from the Nashville area. Although initially most settlers did not hold slaves, by the 1820s, planters began to cultivate tobacco, a commodity crop that was labor-intensive and depended on enslaved African Americans. The planters bought slaves to work their plantations as well as to care for the livestock they bred, thoroughbred horses and cattle. By the time of the Civil War, African Americans comprised about 1/4 of the area's population, typical for Middle Tennessee, where tobacco and hemp were commodity crops. During the Civil War, Tennessee was occupied by the Union from 1862, which led to a breakdown in social organization in Middle Tennessee. By 1910, the county's population was 25,466, including 6,492 black citizens, who continued to make up 1/4 of the total. Most of the residents were still involved in farm work and tobacco was the primary commodity crop, but agricultural mechanization was reducing the need for laborers. Many African Americans left Robertson County and other parts of Tennessee in the Great Migration to northern and midwestern cities for employment and social freedom. According to Robertson County's website, the legends hidden in the hills and caves draw visitors curious about the tales of the Bell Witch, America's most famous spirit. In late summer, fragrant smoke settles over the fields of the county as tobacco farmers begin the process of smoking their crop in 100-year-old barns, producing our famous dark-fired tobacco. I knew I was going to say that. When I typed this up, I thought, I'm going to say dark-fried tobacco, but it is dark-fired tobacco. The area is loaded with history and culture, delicious food and drink, and opportunities for the whole family to enjoy true Southern hospitality. So that's a bit about Robertson County, but let's go into the big story, the Bell Witch. It occurred right there in Robertson County, Tennessee, in the town of Adams, all at the farm of John Bell Sr. He resided with his family along the Red River in an area currently near the town of Adams. According to legend, from 1870 to 1821, his family and the local area came under attack by the mostly invisible entity that was able to speak, affect the physical environment, and shapeshift. Some accounts record the spirit also having been clairvoyant and capable of crossing long distances of time with superhuman speed, or being in more than one place at one time. So let's start with John, or as the witch called him, Old Jack. Not sure why everyone was nicknamed Jack back in the old days. Even my grandpa, his name was Claude, but everyone called him Jack. It's just weird. But I digress. Born in Edgecombe County, North Carolina, Bell was an apprentice barrel maker during his formative years and later pursued a career in farming. He married Lucy Williams in 1782 when she was 12 years old and he was 32. Which I know happened a lot back then, but that's still gross. Just nasty. They settled on the farm he had bought previously. The Bells prospered over the next 8 years and were among the area's most successful planters. In the winter of 1804 to 1805, Bell and his family embarked on a journey over the treacherous mountains of North Carolina and East Tennessee that took them to an area called Red River, settling in the northwest section of present-day Adams, Tennessee. They made many friends and had a prosperous farm. Bell and his wife had 9 children. Jesse, Betsy, Richard, John Jr., Drury, Benjamin, Esther, Zadok, and Joel. Some say he may have come from North Carolina in a veil of suspicion. Supposedly, he was excommunicated for usury by the church there, which was a big part of it. Usury in this case is most likely used as to condemn taking advantage of someone's misfortune, or the legal action of practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest. So, I guess he was like a loan shark. The hunting began sometime in 1817, so they'd been established in the area there in Tennessee for more than a decade. It all started when John Bell witnessed the apparition of a strange creature resembling a dog, but was misshapen, like its bones had been broken many times, and it had a large body, like the size of a wolf. It looked directly at John, much as a person would look at him. Some reports said that it had a head of a rabbit also, so I'm not sure if it was like wolf or rabbit, but anyways, Bell fired at the animal, but it took off and disappeared into the tree line. John walked over to where the dog was in the cornfield, but could see no signs that there was ever anything there. There were no tracks or anything. John kind of forgot about the dog, but when he looked back on it, this is when all the events first started to take place. Not long afterward, his son Drury also saw a strange-looking creature he hadn't seen before. It appeared to be a turkey, but larger than any turkey he'd ever seen. He ran to the house to get his gun, but by the time he got back to the field, the giant turkey was flying away. In both cases, father and son assumed that because they were living in a new part of the world, it was logical that they could see animals that did not live in North Carolina. So they weren't really too concerned about any of that. But not long after, at night in the house, the family heard knocking sounds on the side of the house, but when they got up to look, the knocking would stop. They would lay down and the knocking would start up again, but on the other side of the house. This continued for several weeks, and there was no sign of anyone ever being there when they would go and look outside. There was no tracks or anything. Then one night, 4 of the young sons heard a gnawing sound, like a rat chewing on their bedposts. They got up to check it out, and the minute they touched the floor, the sound stopped. They looked at the bed and saw no marks, no signs of rats anywhere. They went back to bed, and the gnawing sound started again, but much louder. It happened all night and continued the next night. But on the 3rd night, they heard a new sound. It sounded like someone was under their bed gasping for air, almost like someone was being choked. They looked again and could find nothing, so they woke up the rest of the family to see if anything could be found. And the family found nothing also. Some other reports that I've read said it sounded like a dog sounds, but there were no dogs either. As early as 1817, John Bell Sr. was abused both verbally and physically. The spirit regularly called him Old Jack and menaced him with profanity, curses, and threats. Soon after the haunting began, he started having trouble speaking, eating, and swallowing. He said it felt like he had a stick of wood lodged between his cheeks and his mouth. The agony would plague him until his death. The spirit often threatened John Bell Sr., and when asked why, after it began talking, the spirit would answer, because he deserves killing. No further explanation was ever given. John himself, who'd always been normal, started acting weird. He would stop mid-sentence and quiver and shake and zone out. Then he would go home and go to bed and stare at the wall for hours. This continued, and it would happen more and more often, and afterwards the staring at the wall would go on longer and longer. Whatever it was causing everything seemed to focus on John and his daughter Betsy. Betsy was subjected to the most torment other than John. The spirit would stick her with invisible pins. It would also slap Betsy until her face was red and drag her around the room by her hair. I also read that it would tie her hair to the bedpost. Combs would fly out of Betsy's hands and hair. Another trick it would play on Betsy was to untie her shoelaces and throw the shoes across the room. The family was afraid the spirit would kill Betsy, so it sent her to a friend's house to spend the night. Many of these nights were spent at a friend Theeny Thorne's house. That's an interesting name, Theeny Thorne. It even followed her to Thorne's house, and one night Theeny chided the entity for its actions. Their spirit responded with crude laughter, and an itinerant witch doctor gave Betsy a potion that would cure her from the affliction. Instead, Betsy vomited pins as the spirit laughed. One day, one of the other daughters, Esther, was being followed by a woman dressed in black. Esther was going after chicken eggs. When Esther went back to the house, the woman was following closer to the household. Esther recognized her as a neighbor and started calling for her. She walked closer to her, and the woman ignored her. Esther stopped and the woman stopped. And then she would continue and the woman would continue. She stopped again, and the woman took her bonnet off her head and her black matted hair fell down her back, and she started to comb her hair with her fingers. Esther got closer and realized the lady was pulling her hair out of the scalp and not combing her hair with her fingers. Esther runs to the house, yells for her sister. They both look out, and the woman makes eye contact with Esther. She turns suddenly and walks around the property. The woman climbed over the fence with 3 children who weren't there prior to that. The woman and the 3 children each climbed their own tree and began swaying on the limbs. Esther's husband comes in, and she and her sister call for him to come look. But he can't see any woman or kids, but he can see the trees swaying unnaturally, but he can't see anything in them. So Esther, her sister, and her husband go out to the trees, and there's no one there, and there's no tracks or anything like anyone had been there. At first, John would not allow his family to speak about this to anyone. But finally, after being harassed nightly, John confided in one of his friends about the occurrences that had been happening. His friend knew that John was not the kind of person to joke around, and he knew that whatever was happening was definitely out of the normal. So his friend spent the night at the house. They ended up hearing the same things, the knocking and the gnawing on the furniture. He even heard the gasping sound. His friend didn't even last the night. He left in the middle of the night. Other neighbors and friends tried to stay at the house and nights, and nothing stopped. It continued with whoever was there. One friend, John Porter, claimed that the witch crawled in bed with him while he was staying at the house. He grabbed it, wrapped it up in a blanket, and tried to throw it in the fire. But it was too heavy and smelled too bad to keep carrying it, so it escaped. Sounds like a likely excuse, Mr. Porter. There was no evidence of this even to the family, so who knows. People began coming from everywhere to visit the spirit, and it seemed to love the attention it got. General Andrew Jackson, at the time, and his army, his group at least, had heard of it. They traveled to Adams to see what was going on. General Jackson encountered it on the way to the visit. It stopped their carts and wouldn't let them go forward. Supposedly, Andrew Jackson said it was the witch. Suddenly, a metallic voice was heard coming from the woods saying, "All right, General, I'll let the wagons move, but I'll see you tonight." Then the cart lurched forward. The group spent the night at the Bell home. Jackson wished the spirit would come, and it arrived taunting them. The spirit began beating a witch hunter that they had with them, and dragged him out of the house by his nose. Andrew Jackson was reported as saying, "By the eternal, boys, I never saw so much fun in my whole life, or in all my life." But this one, there's no documentation that he ever was near the Bell farm, as that part of Tennessee at the time, so some don't believe this. I guess he was kind of meticulous in his records. In all of his journals, he talked about where he was all the time, and there's absolutely no proof that he was ever there, so who knows. As more and more people came to visit, one of the people asked the entity who it was. She, or it, answered, "I'm a spirit. I was once very happy, but have been disturbed and made unhappy." Another time she said, "I am a spirit from everywhere, heaven, hell, the earth. I am in the air, the houses, in any place at any time." The spirit seemed to enjoy when people talked to it. The spirit enjoyed religious arguments and was familiar with the Bible. John Johnston, the son of James, devised a test for the witch, something no one outside his family would know, asking the entity what his Dutch step-grandmother in North Carolina would say to the slaves if she thought that they were doing something wrong. The witch replied with his grandmother's accent, "Hut tut, what has happened now?" In another account, an Englishman stopped the visit and offered to investigate. On remarking on the family overseas, the witch suddenly began to mimic his English parents. Again, in the early morning, the witch woke him to voices of his parents worried as they heard his voice as well. The Englishman quickly left that morning and later wrote to the Bell family that the entity had visited his family in England. He apologized for his skepticism. The spirit would spread gossip from other households. Someone tested the spirit. They would ask it questions, and it would leave and come back like it was checking on something, but always have the right answer. The spirit offered diverse explanations of why it appeared, tying its origin to the disturbance of a Native American burial mound located on the property, and it sent Drew Bell and Bennett Porter on an unproductive search for buried treasure. With the emergence of full conversations, the spirit repeated word for word 2 sermons given 13 miles apart at the same time. The entity was well acquainted with biblical text and appeared to enjoy religious arguments. It could show up as a rabbit, black dog, bear, and make different animal sounds. It could quote scripture in a way to astound the most learned minister. It took supreme delight in going to church, and later when the minister came to the Bell house repeating his sermon, mimic him exactly. The witch was omnipresent and omniscient. She replied to Mrs. Bell's inquiry about her son's trip to Carolina that he had returned and fared badly, and thus heralded his return before the family saw him. She repeated Parson Johnson's sermon, delivered 13 miles away to the parson himself, which I think I mentioned a minute ago, as he sat there that night in Mr. Bell's house. The witch became profane and ribald and howled, saying and swore. John Jr. and the spirit often had deep intellectual conversations. He often called her the spirit of the damned. Even so, the spirit did not harm him. Instead, it would give him good advice, which he usually ignored. After a while, the spirit would take a break from hurting the Bell family and would have conversations with them. On one occasion, which I think this is the same thing I talked about before, but I'm not sure. I couldn't really tell when I was researching. But it says on one occasion, John Jr. was discussing a trip by horseback he was going to take to North Carolina to settle some family business. The spirit broke the conversation and told John Jr. that it would be a wasted trip, as the matter had already been settled. She advised him that a rich woman was on her way to Robertson County to visit friends. Because both were unmarried, they could meet and have made a good couple. He went anyway. The trip was wasted, and he might well have missed the love of his life. So maybe he should have listened to her. The spirit gave specific instructions for locating the treasure. I think this is also about the Native American burial ground. All of this research I did was on different pages and nothing matched up, so I'm just inferring that this is the same thing. But the spirit gave specific instructions for locating treasure, but after a day of digging at the designated spot, the spirit began laughing at them and their foolishness and believing such a story. Still another time it claimed to be old Kate Batts' witch. Kate Batts was a neighbor of the Bell family. She and John Bell had supposedly had a violent quarrel shortly after the Bell family arrived in Robertson County. Some people say it was over a mule, and some say it was over a slave. She was a woman well known for her eccentricities. Many people believed her to be a witch. But she was also very religious from what I was reading, so I'm not sure if this was just all gossip or who knows what. But they said that she had a habit for begging pens away from any woman she met. And according to the superstition of the day, loaning a pen to someone gave that person witch-like control over the lender. Not everyone believed in witches, of course, but everyone in the neighborhood made a practice of hiding their pens away whenever Kate Batts came to call. Whether or not the spirit had any connection with Kate Batts, the name stuck. It would forever afterwards be known as the Bell Witch, and to most people then and now, it was simply Kate, a name it cheerfully accepted. The spirit could speak several languages. One source said it claimed it was one of 7, and it gave itself 3 names: Three Waters, Kypography, and Black Dog. Another source said soon there was another strange development. In place of one witch, there were 4: Black Dog, Kypography, Mathematics, and Jerusalem. Up to this time, the voice had been feminine. Now Black Dog spoke in a high, harsh key. Mathematics and Kypography had soft, feminine voices, and Jerusalem, the rough, changing pipe of a boy. The supernatural powers attributed to the Tennessee spirit have also been compared to the jinn of mythology. For some reason, the spirit really cared for Lucy, John's wife. The witch was quoted as calling Lucy the most perfect woman alive. When Lucy complained to the witch about its treatment of her family, it would reply that although it had hurt her family, it would never hurt her. When Lucy fell ill with pleurisy, an illness that made her bedridden and could have killed her, the spirit talked to her in a soft, kind voice and brought her grapes, even though they were out of season. It knew that Lucy loved to eat grapes. It would also drop grapes on the bed when Lucy had company. The witch also knew that Lucy liked hazelnuts. It would drop nuts from the ceiling into Lucy's bed. Lucy said that she could not eat the nuts because she could not crack them open, so immediately cracked nuts fell on the bed. It would sing songs to Lucy as well. But out of the whole family, it was John Bell Sr. that this entity truly hated. Perhaps the anger and hatred was a result of the initial encounter when Bell shot at the unknown animal, Or perhaps its entity was someone he had scorned in life. Supposedly, after the banging noises began in their home, John Bell Sr.'s health began to decline. That's when it all started to decline. He began to experience episodes of facial twitching and paralysis of his mouth, which left him with difficulties in eating and swallowing. I mentioned earlier he said that it felt like he had a stick in his mouth. Not long after that, John and his son were walking in the yard, and suddenly John's body began contorting. His son grabbed him to help him, and he heard shrieking all around him. Not from John, just when he touched him, he could hear it in the air. Suddenly, it stopped, and John stopped contorting, but he told his son he didn't have much time left. By the fall of 1820, John would be left confined to the house. Reveling in Bell's illness, the entity would remove his shoes when he tried to walk or slap his face when he began to experience seizures. Its voice could be heard all over the farm, cursing and chastising old Jack Bell. December 19th, 1820, John was in bed and didn't get up. They went to check on him, and they couldn't wake him up. They went to the medicine cabinet and found a vial of dark liquid and nothing else. They called a doctor, and he didn't know what it was either, but he told them to test it on the animal. They found a stray cat and gave it to it, and it died immediately. Which, poor kitty, like, what the heck? Why didn't they try it on another family member? But y'all know I'm an animal lover. But then John died the next day. The haunting stopped pretty much after that, and he was the only death attributed to a spirit ever. While investigating, the police heard a disembodied voice say, "I killed it. I did it. I killed old John." This voice had been heard by the family oftentimes before. She also was noted to be at his funeral singing songs and interrupting the service. Like, what the heck? She couldn't even leave them alone at the funeral. I don't know. It's crazy. After all this, young Betsy Bell continued to be the primary target of the witch mischief, with everything supposedly came to a head when Betsy decided to marry her husband-to-be. His name was Joshua Gardner. He was a young man who lived in the same community, and although the couple had their parents' permission to marry, they did not get the permission of the witch. It's said that Betsy and Joshua were followed by the unwelcome taunts of the witch, continually demanding that Betsy not marry her beloved. Perhaps Betsy's patience wore thin, or she finally began to agree with the witch. But on Easter Monday, 1821, Betsy met Joshua at the river and called off their engagement. And after that, the supernatural disturbances started to fade. Over the years, many have reported seeing different things in the property, in the caves around the property. And all around Robertson County, different mysterious things have happened that people attribute to the Bell Witch. But nothing really of any substance. I mean, the Bell family was the one that was mainly targeted, and it pretty much stopped after that. So, do you believe it was a witch or a spirit or even a demon? Was it a hoax? Was it mass hysteria? I honestly don't know, but the skeptic part of me wants to go over some things that may have or could have happened. So none of this comes from the direct family. There's no official record, but word of mouth of it being passed down. Even with Andrew Jackson's visit, there's no official record, which I mentioned earlier, of him being near the family, or that Adams, Tennessee during the time. The most famous book with most of the information was written by Martin Van Buren Ingram. And that was in the late 1800s, many years after all this occurred. Today, the legend of the Bell Witch is considered one of the most documented hauntings in American history. However, were it not for Martin Van Buren Ingram, the story may have long ago faded into obscurity. In 1866, with no prior experience in editing and publishing, he did begin a career in it, actively working in the newspaper industry until 1881, when poor health and family tragedy limited his interest and ability to continue. But sometime between 1890 and 1892, Ingram would travel to Adams, Tennessee, the community of Red River and Cedar Hill, for the purpose of viewing the grounds where the historic and most intensely thrilling events were enacted 75 years ago. There he would interview individuals who were then living and familiar with the wonderful phenomena that awakened such widespread sensation. Ingram would then write several reports about the Bell Witch. He wrote a book named, and I quote, this is a long title, An authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch, the wonder of the 19th century, and unexplained phenomenon of the Christian era. The mysterious talking goblin that terrorized the west end of Robertson County, Tennessee, tormenting John Bell to his death. The story of Betsy Bell, her lover, and the haunting Sphinx. So yeah, that title's a mouthful. The introduction of Ingram's book included a letter from James Allen Bell, grandson of John Bell Sr. The letter explains that John Bell's sons had decided that none of their family papers were made public until the last immediate family member died, an event which occurred in 1891 when the youngest member of the family, Joel Egbert Bell, passed. It is believed that Ingram had developed a friendship with John Bell prior to his death. Joel Bell prior to his death, and it is from Joel that Ingram received insight. So he actually, I'm sorry, so sorry, I lost my place. He received insight. However, being the youngest, his knowledge of the events came mostly from listening to the tales of his mother and siblings and not his actual memories. Ingram's introduction also speaks of a family notes and a diary given to him by James Allen Bell that had been written by Richard Williams Bell when he was 35 years old in 1846. Richard Bell had been between 6 and 10 years old when the entity first manifested itself in the family home, and he was about 17 when it returned in 1828. That was when it was going after Betsy and trying to stop the marriage. The family manuscript, totaling about 90 pages, is the only known first-hand account of the Bell Witch. Yet, it also casts a shadow of the that's such a hard word to say, legitimacy of the legend. It is believed that no one outside of Ingram ever actually saw the Bell family manuscript, leading some to question the paper's existence, suggesting that the entirety of the Bell Witch legend was conceived of by Ingram himself, the product of a newspaper man's imagination and ability to capture the public's attention. But it was mentioned in print prior to Ingram's. One such article was purportedly published in 1849 in the Saturday Evening Post. Believed to be the earliest written public record concerning the events surrounding the Bell family, it, like the Bell manuscript, has been lost. A reprint of the article from February 7th, 1856 edition of Vermont newspaper, the Green Mountain Freeman, was published under the title The Tennessee Ghost. So, if the events ever happened at all is under question. But if they did happen, there's still some things that are explainable. John Bell's fits he had could easily have been seizures, or maybe Parkinson's, or multiple sclerosis, something like that. Strokes, who knows? But it was probably something not known at the time, so, it seems supernatural. I read from a very old article that some thought it was Betsy or John Jr. putting on like a ventriloquist or something. It also mentioned something about maybe a traveling circus group that could be fooling them, but I really couldn't find anything about that, and I'm not sure what there would be the reason to do that. The animal part, when they saw the animals at the beginning, could just be like the Flatwoods Monster and the Mothman. Maybe they were seeing something entirely normal, but the light of the day or night distorted it, making it look like something else. John Bell may have actually been poisoned, too. That could very well have happened. But was it the Bell Witch that did it? Or maybe someone closer to him? Someone most definitely alive. Heck, maybe it was Lucy herself, since the spirit loved her so much. Who really knows? But let's look at the other side of the things. What if it really was something supernatural? What was it? And why did it choose the Bells? The story of Kate Batts may have been right. Maybe she was a witch, and John Bell did something to her to upset her enough to curse him by sending a spirit to attack the family. Maybe she liked Lucy and didn't want her to be attacked. This angle also I've not seen, but what if Lucy herself set the spirit on the family? Maybe John did something to her or her family. But I can't imagine that Lucy would set it on her daughter. So who knows? If it was just a ghost, where did it come from and how did it behave the way it did? And why the Bells? Was it a Native American spirit? Did they put their house on some sacred land? If it was supernatural, I feel like it had to have been more like a demon or something. I feel like it was too evil to be anything else. It knew several languages and mentioned others. It can talk in different voices. Definitely sounds like demonic activity to me. Which I don't even know if demons exist, but if they do, it definitely sounds like demonic activity. So, what do you think it was? I'm kind of skeptical on this one. I always say whatever the people experienced was real to them, but I don't even know if they experienced anything or if it was just an old tale that told that became a became a belief of people. It's like that telephone game. Things are passed down and it changed and passed down and changed and passed down. So who knows? But as I say, I always try to keep an open mind about things, and we don't know what all's out there in this world. I will say, if the Bell Witch is real, it's absolutely terrifying that a family went through all of that. No matter if it's real or not, it's still a legend told to this day. And I'm sure it brings a lot of publicity and traffic into Robertson County, which is always financially good for an area. I feel like you should always lean into your local legends. You can visit the Bell Witch Cave. Their website says the historic Bell Witch Cave has preserved some of the artifacts from the original Bell Cabin, such as a chimney stone and an iron kettle. You can see these items along with newspaper articles, photos, and other artifacts from the time period in which John Bell and his family resided there. When touring the reconstructed John Bell cabin, you can do a lantern tour at night. They even have overnight paranormal investigations that you can do. So if you're ever in the area and you're into that kind of stuff, definitely go check it out. So, Spooky Monday number 1 is done. 3 more to go. As always, thank you for listening. Y'all rock. I love you all. Please like and share this podcast. Rate it if you can. No one's rated me yet except my mom, and that kind of makes me sad. So if you can rate me, that would be awesome. Follow me on socials under Poisoned Appalachia. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also contact me on Facebook or through my email, poisonedappalachia@gmail.com. Facebook is really the best way to contact me. That's what I'm on the most. But thanks, y'all, and have a great week. And next week, hopefully, will be even more exciting. Bye-bye.